Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Halleck. This week, we're sitting down with one of the reporters who covers the North Country to talk about some of the big stories over the past couple of weeks here in northern New York, as well as at the state capitol in Albany. And joining us once again this week is Pat Bradley, who is the North Country Bureau Chief for WAMC Northeast Public Radio. Welcome back. Great to see you.
Hi, Tom. Good to see you.
We begin in Albany once again, where the state legislature is finally beginning to pass a state budget, nearly 2 months past the April 1st deadline, and more than 2 weeks after Governor Kathy Hochul announced that her office had reached an agreement with legislative leaders on a record $268 billion spending plan. State lawmakers voting on the budget bills this past week that include a boost in education funding, a 2% increase in foundation aid for school districts. That's up 1% from what the governor's executive budget had. Also, the final budget includes a controversial immigrant protection package that limits cooperation between ICE and state and local governments. And there's a 5-year delay of the state's zero-emission school bus mandate. Votes on other big-ticket items that dragged the budget negotiations on for weeks, including changes to the state's 2019 climate law, expected to be approved by the end of the week. And Pat, you've been covering the EV bus mandate story for several years now. The delay in school districts having to convert their fleets of school buses to all electric by 2035, now delayed for 5 years until 2040. So a number of school districts were having trouble getting this done, having trouble affording buses, having the infrastructure.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the representatives from the area kept trying to tell their peers down in Albany, this is not feasible under the time frame from the original proposal. Some of these buses in the rural Adirondack areas, they're going 50, 100 miles a day or more. And there's no charging infrastructure, either at the schools or out on the roads. So this has been a big issue for particularly rural schools since it was first proposed.
Yep.
I'm not sure in the Adirondacks that infrastructure can be built even in 5 years.
And it's costly. And that's the other thing. Speaker Hastie said that yes, there are still plans to help supplement school districts, help them buy the buses, buy the infrastructure, but that still has to all be worked out. So the school districts really have no idea how much money could be coming down the road to help with all of this. The representatives from up in the North Country, Michael Cashman, Matt Simpson, Dan Steck, have been uniform in their call for there to be a delay, put it on hold, delay it. I think both Steck and Simpson have wanted to see it overturned altogether, but they've been saying that the school districts up here in this part of New York State cannot possibly meet this deadline by 2035.
No, and I've also heard that there's some urban centers that have said we can't meet it either for different reasons. But the idea of kind of putting this EV mandate into a fast track just doesn't work for a state as large as New York.
And this delay sort of came out of the blue. They've been calling for this for a number of years. When the budget deadline was missed, a representative from Central New York, a state senator, Chris Ryan, floated this. They caught enough legislators that said, yeah, let's delay this for at least 5 years, so from 2035 to 2040.
But in 5 years, can those school districts afford just even to buy the buses? My understanding is some of these EV buses cost $500,000.
Yeah, 2-3 times what their buses cost now.
Take a look at some of our rural school districts that have got 20, 30, 40 buses. I mean, that adds up after a while, and I don't think voters would want an increase in their taxes for an EV bus fleet. Maybe one, maybe two at a time, gradually put it in, but And
the federal subsidies have dried up. That was a big part of it to start. So now, yes, the question may very well be, will the state step up and help with significant subsidies to buy the buses and buy the infrastructure as the years roll on now and we get closer to 2035 and 2040? How much will the state help these rural school districts in northern New York pick up the tab?
And we have the Environmental Protection Fund, but that only goes so far because that's not dedicated strictly to EV buses. It's a lot of other environmental concerns. So if they decide to use some of that funding, what is it going to distract from in other needed environmental policies, upgrades, etc.?
I suspect a lot more battles lie ahead over this EV mandate.
Yeah.
But for now, the 5-year delay is passing and will be part of the budget deal. Other big stories in the past couple of weeks. President Donald Trump's endorsed candidate for New York's 21st congressional district held his first campaign rally in Plattsburgh a couple of weeks ago. Republican businessman Anthony Constantino held a campaign event that drew about 50 supporters. Constantino talked about why he got into the race, as well as where he stands on issues like gun rights, immigration, and manufacturing. He says that he is a staunch ally of President Trump, which we knew, and promises to support the president's agenda in Congress if elected. Of course, in the past month, the president threw his weight behind Constantino, the CEO of Sticker Mule in Amsterdam, who was running against State Assemblyman Robert Smullen in the June Republican primary. The endorsement, as we've talked about, flies in the face of New York's GOP establishment, including the state party chair, Ed Cox, and several committee chairs of the 15 committees that make up the counties that make up the 21st congressional district, who had already announced that they were backing Robert Smullen for the nomination. You caught up with Robert Smullen a few weeks ago in Altona. He came up for a campaign event. Was he surprised by the president's endorsement of Constantino?
I don't think so, because Constantino has been so actively recruiting President Trump's endorsement, and Smullen also noted that Constantino had been promoting himself to Roger Stone, who is a very well-known,
loyal Trump friend and MAGA supporter, and he hired Stone to be a consultant.
Yes.
And we know that Roger Stone had a meeting with President Trump, and then shortly after that meeting, the president's endorsement came.
Yes. Now, during this GOP gathering in Altona, it wasn't just Mr. Smullen that was there, but Bruce Blakeman, who is a Trump-endorsed candidate for governor, was also there. And so during all of the intros, the vice chair of the Clinton County Republican Committee got up to introduce Mr. Smullen and said, Mr. Trump got it wrong. And there was applause to that among the GOP crowd. So it appears at least the GOP in Clinton County are strongly behind Robert Smullen. I believe it's 11 of the 15 county committees have endorsed Robert Smullen. So he's very confident about where he stands. You've probably seen some of the ads on Facebook and everything where Smullen is basically saying Constantino doesn't have the temperament to be in Congress, claims that Constantino was not always a Republican. And they're having a nasty little back and forth. They
are. Constantino, on the other hand, firmly believes that the president's endorsement is going to help him win the primary, and that he will prevail in the primary. When he was here for that event in Plattsburgh, he talked with reporters and told them that he fully believes that this endorsement, the endorsement from Rudy Giuliani, another huge MAGA supporter, Roger Stone working on his behalf, he believes that support is going to connect with the core voters who will go to the polls on primary day, and that he's going to prevail. Did you ask Smullen, when he was up here in the North Country at Altona that day, that if he does lose the June primary, the Republican primary, will he still run on the Conservative Party line? He has already received their nomination.
Yes.
Their endorsement, their nomination.
I didn't ask him specifically, but he did indicate that he would continue in the campaign as the conservative nominee.
As far as the Democrats, there is now a debate scheduled between the two Democrats running in the June primary for the Democratic nomination in New York 21. Stuart Amaral and Blake Gendebien will square off on June 15th at WRGB TV. That's down in Schenectady, which covers a lot of the southern and western towns that make up the huge New York 21 district. You spoke with Mr. Amaral this week, and he is indeed now on the ballot for the primary.
Yes.
Hundreds of his petition signatures had been challenged, mostly by supporters of Blake Gendebien and
yes.
a few committee members in the 15 counties again. But the State Board of Elections cleared his way. Mr. Amaral, a restaurant owner from Lake Placid, is now on the ballot for the June 23rd primary. And you spoke with him. He stopped by your studios here in Plattsburgh this week.
Yeah, I got the sense from him that that's done, over with. He's moving forward with it. It didn't really impact the momentum of his campaign, he says. I think he's now moved beyond that and is trying to focus on the campaign to win the primary.
He had been critical. Mr. Gendebien had turned down at least
He
one or
said
two
five.
other debate requests, and so he was critical of that, saying that that Mr. Gendebien should square off on a stage with him face to face, and so now that will happen on June 15th.
Mr. Amaral said that he had penned an open letter to Mr. Gendebien saying, I recognize that you've turned down several debates, but this is an important part of the democratic process, etc. And somehow in the exchange of these letters, Mr. Gendebien agreed to a debate, according to Mr. Amaral.
Yeah. Early voting, by the way, gets underway in just 2 weeks on June 13th. And so then the primaries will be held on Tuesday, June 23rd. Pat, you covered an informational picket last week by union members at the University of Vermont Health Network, Champlain Valley Physicians Hospital, the medical center in Plattsburgh. They held an informational picket on the sidewalk outside of the hospital. Big issue for them, part of contract negotiations, seems to be staffing.
Yeah, staffing levels. But the union is saying that the state mandates certain staffing levels, and the hospital has kind of been bypassing that. And so they are concerned that having to care for more patients leads to worse care for patients. And they say with the hospital supposedly bypassing the percentages that are allowed, the staffing levels that are supposed to be set, that it could put patients at risk.
You reached out to the hospitals, to CEO Michelle LeBeau. Did they respond?
They basically sent out a standard press release saying that we support the union's right to have an informational picket. We're still working with them. I believe they said it was, during the 15 negotiation sessions, they've been working out things. The contract ended back in December. So they've been meeting regularly to try to pound out some of these issues. So
the next negotiation session is coming up early next
June
month.
10th, I think it is.
It looks as if Governor Kathy Hochul is now on board this idea of New York City and Lake Placid teaming up and submitting a joint bid to host another Winter Olympics.
Yeah, that came out over the Memorial Day holiday weekend. There's this thought that, the Milan Olympics and Cortina were like 250 miles apart.
Yep.
So why can't Lake Placid and New York City, which is a similar distance, do the same thing? This has been bandied about for quite some time in different ways of maybe accomplishing it. I remember years ago they were talking about, well, maybe we could do Lake Placid and Montreal.
Right.
But I think the cross-border stuff kind of became a bit too complex, particularly after COVID and tariffs and stuff. So there's a New York City assemblyman who wrote a joint letter with former Assemblyman D. Billy Jones, who represents this area, saying this could work, this could be a good idea. Back in January, there was a forum in Lake Placid, actually at Mount Van Hovenberg, to discuss the feasibility of this. And that was a good forum because it really talked about, well, yeah, we could get some folks to go to the New York City venues, have people come up here, but they also discussed some of the challenges, like traffic.
Yeah, still.
Yeah, I mean, even by 2040, it's like, can you redo the road work that would need to be redone to have the thousands of people that would want to come up for this? But in the meantime, the state has been investing in the Olympic facilities. They are prime grade.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. They are world class. And so, even if it's in 2040, if they keep the maintenance going on these venues, they could host an Olympics. It's those little things like, how do people get there?
Right.
Which ones would be in Lake Placid? Which ones would be in New York City?
Right.
So
right.
It's started to gain a bit of traction, and I think Governor Hochul has kind of pushed that traction forward.
And we're looking at either 2038 or 2042, I believe.
2042 would be the most feasible year to do an Olympics, a joint Olympics.
Well, Pat, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. Good to see you.